So now, since we're speaking about decentralized renewable energy solutions and energy communities, we would also like to get an insight and see what your experiences are and what your expertise is. And because we're quite a few people, we're 51 now, we have prepared a poll, which we would like to do with you, and to also keep it a bit interactive. We will also have a group work after all the presentations. But let's start with the poll first. So basically there will be a poll appearing on your screen in a few seconds, and you have a couple of minutes to answer the questions. And of course the poll is anonymous.
You see it. So the first question, are you a member of an energy community or energy cooperative? So we have 29%, so 11 participants. Not yet, but I'm planning to become a member. It's 60%. It means 6 participants of the webinar. And no, but I'm interested in the topic. It's the majority with 55% and 21 of our participants. So that's great. And so we have already some members and experts here. And the second question is, how would you assess a political situation when it comes to implementing decentralized renewable energy solutions in your country? That's a very important question. So we see no progress of a third of the participants. We see little progress, 66. So, and we see 3% is very progressive. And I'm very keen on later on who is it and which country is it, which is very progressive. Maybe Ireland, but let's guess and let's see later on. That's interesting to know, really. And the third question is, how familiar are you with the renewable energy directive, the RED II? It's 24% don't know it. So that's good to have you here, because that's also one of the target of the webinars. I have some knowledge about it, so that's often the case because it's really complex. So it's 2/3, it's also the majority, and I'm an expert on it. It's 11%, it's 4 people, and I invite you to support us if we are discussing and if questions arise during the discussion. That was the result of the poll.
Great, thank you. Perfect. Yeah, I think it would be really good for our discussions later to have some experts on board, but to also have everyone else on board. And I think it's time now to talk about who will be speaking. And we have 4 great speakers today from 4 different countries. And together we are working on the project, The Power of Energy Communities, which is funded by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. And our first speaker will be Katharina Hamersbrunner. She is responsible for implementing and advocating for sustainable energy and climate solutions at WCF. She is a board member of the energy cooperative Bang in Munich and of Bündnis Bürgerenergie, which is an umbrella organization for citizens' energy in Germany. Katharina will give us an overview of the European Renewable Energy Directive, RED II, and an insight into the current German situation. We will then move on further north and get an input from our Danish partner, Gunnar Olesen, who is the coordinator of Enforce Europe and the leader of the Secretariat. His work mainly focuses on the EU and climate policy and the 100% renewable energy vision 2030-2050. And Gunnar will present energy sharing concepts in electricity and heating in Denmark, and how Denmark might handle the implementation of the directive. Then from Poland, we will hear from Joanna Formaga. She is the president of the Alliance of Associations Polish Green Network. She's been involved in the environmental movement in Poland for over 20 years. And Joanna is the co-founder and leader of the social movement More Than Energy for the development of community power and civic energy in Poland. And her presentation today will focus on the challenges of citizen energy in Poland. And last but not least, we will hear from Derya Nazan Ünveriyor, about the Turkish experience when it comes to energy communities and cooperatives. And she is the chairwoman of the Troya Energy Cooperative in Turkey, and she works as a lawyer. So I think we should start now, and I will give the word to Katharina.
Thank you very much, Anja. So good morning to everybody, also from my side. It's really great that so many are joining our webinar so early in the morning. So for some of our Eastern European colleagues, it's not as early, but anyhow, it's great. And we are very happy about your interest on community energy, because that's a topic of today. And we have seen, next slide, please. That many of you are interested and are already a member of an energy community, and we see a big potential, and there is really light at the end of the tunnel with the directive. Next slide, please. Yes, energy communities. Anja mentioned that it's a big challenge and climate emergency. We have to act now, and now we are in Corona times, for example. We are looking and we have to wait for medicine, and to protect the climate we have perfect medicine, we have renewable energy, we have a base for a legal framework in the countries, which could be the new energy rule book, the clean energy package for all, which was finalized last year. That's a new framework to protect the climate, to meet the Paris Agreement, which is so important. And it's very complex. It consists of 8 legislative laws. And since we are talking today about energy communities and the power of energy communities and the decentralized energy transition, it means a development from the bottom up. 2 directives are very important. It's the Renewable Energy Directive, that's the focus of today, and it's the Electricity Market Directive. So, and we are talking about directives, not regulations. Regulations are stronger. They don't need to be transposed. They come into action directly. But directives, they need to be transposed. It means they have to be translated in national laws, and that has to be done via the deadlines you see on the screen. Next slide, please. And so which content we are talking about, the 2 directives. So it's a Renewable Energy Directive. It's a new policy framework for renewables. So that is also production, the consumption of the renewable energy to increase the share of energy. That's a target to protect the environment, to increase energy security, to increase resilience. So that's also very important in times of Corona, for example. And it allows the households and the business to become energy producers. And very important, what we can read in the directive is what is marked in red, is that it puts the consumer at the center of the energy transition with a clear right to produce own renewable energy. That's really very new, and it's the first time that the consumers are mentioned in a directive of the European Commission. So that's very important, and that is the base and has to be used by the national governments of the member states. Next slide, please. So here we see the same slide. It's in Polish, because I have seen that we have many Polish participants in the webinar. And I only want to point out here that I took this text here on the slide out of the web page of the European Commission, and you find very nice fact sheets on all the directives on the web page, and it's worthwhile to have a look on it. It's in different languages, and it summarizes the clean energy package in a very, very nice and understandable way. So that you will find it in various languages. So that's the overall frame of the Renewable Energy Directive and the most important outcome for us with the consumers. Next slide, please. And the second directive, I want to mention it, it's not the focus of today, it's the Electricity Market Directive. So the first renewable energy directive is dealing with the renewables, to increase the share of the renewables, to organize it, and the electricity market directive is the framework for the EU electricity market, because the electricity market has to face and has to be fit for the challenges for a decentralized energy market, has to be better connected, has to be more consumer oriented. And so here we also need to shift, and we see really a lot of regulations which are focused on the consumer and the prosumer, so people producing and consuming renewable energy. So what, for example, what we see, the second bullet point is information in electricity bills will be improved. That's a big point, because many people do not understand the electricity bills. It's so complicated with a lot of levies. So that's a point of transparency. The other point, to tackle the growing issue of energy poverty, it's really so important and great to have this point included in the electricity market directive, because we see about 50 million people in the European Union being affected by energy poverty. So 50 million, and the number is increasing. And so we also see in some countries that energy communities are sometimes a bit, it's not an elite group, but it's a certain group of the society. So really to have a directive and to have regulations and laws which covers the needs of everybody, of the whole society. And the most outbreaking point here in the electricity, in the market directive, is that consumers will be able to participate on all the steps of the value chain of the electricity market, meaning in producing, in consuming, in sharing, in selling, in storing. And that's really very new, and that's outbreaking. And we see that's a very good base for a decentralized energy system, which will solve, also can contribute to solve our climate problem. Next slide, please. So here I summarized again the two directives. So the directive on renewable energy, the RED II, and the electricity market directive. So it's anyhow only the two directives. It's rather complicated to go through, but what is important, what we mentioned, is really to have the regulation on the level of the European Commission, that it's the first time that rights and also duties of citizens, of consumers, of prosumers, of energy communities are regulated and have to be transposed into national law. So that's very important. So that's a directive, and you all know many people talk about the European Green New Deal. So that's also a framework, and been going through the European New Green Deal. So the language is not so ambitious regarding energy communities, but it's also here's a focus to have a socially fair and inclusive energy transition. Just to mention another big framework, but here it's a base where we can work on and where we can push decentralized energy system and energy communities and markets. Next slide, please. And implementing and transposing the legislative in an ambitious way, that will be possible to shift from a today's centralized, still very much a centralized energy system, what we see on the left-hand side with the very powerful utility companies, with the TSOs and DSOs, of course, what we need, the regulators, the industry, also, of course, being a consumer, but starting to produce renewable energy in a very innovative way, and the consumers and the small group of prosumers and energy communities. We know that energy communities in some countries contribute to a very big extent to the production of renewable energy, but of the contribution to the overall energy system is really not very big. But implementing and transposing and using the opportunities we see in the directive, so we could come to our vision, what you see on the right-hand side, that where the prosumers and energy communities are really in the heart of the energy system, are really key stakeholders, are key actors, and are the center of the production, of course, of consumption, of trading, and where a lot of activities are taking place on a local and regional and decentralized level, and which is from our end really one of the only solution to go ahead with 100% renewable energy supply and energy system. But it would mean that system business model will change, for example, for utility companies, and as you all know, that's a point and that's a problem we have to face with, and we have to transform and to go ahead this step. Next slide, please. What do we need for such a decentralized energy system with citizens and energy communities in the heart? So of course, we need a lot of things. So we need encouraged politicians, we need people like you being engaged in an energy transition, we need active key stakeholders, and of course we need, for example, setting ambitious and binding targets on the national level. One very easy target, for example, could be as a rooftop photovoltaic target to have a maximum use of the roof space. That would be easy. It would push the economy now in or after Corona. So that would be so important, and it would increase the production of renewable energy. That would be one point. A second point could be that we have a target for energy communities. So we have at least in each country 1,000 or more energy communities. So that's very important. The second point is also that also new actors entering the market, for example, the prosumers, the energy communities, they need a favorable framework to be economically successful. That, for example, would means if you do self-consumption, so producing energy consuming, that you need a fair remuneration of excess electricity. So overall, a fair rate design of energy prices, of the grid price, and of course, a simple taxation. So all the points of the additional costs, so the bureaucracy has to be very low. The third point is supporting renewable energy communities. So there has to be a clear political will to have renewable energy communities. So it has to be easy to set up, for example, energy communities. And what we are doing in our power project with our partners from Denmark, from Turkey. So that's also to exchange experience, to push projects, to see where do we have good and best practice, for example. That's important. And for this point, it's also very important to support the participation of the energy poor and marginalized households. Again, to have this point to address everybody, to provide energy-related education, for example. So that's very, very important. We need also coherence at all levels. That's a big issue. We have many laws, we have many regulations. They are not always streamlined. So that's absolutely important. And we need also clear responsibility, because distributed energy means also distributed responsibility. So we have more actors. At the moment or in the past, for example, the responsible politicians, they talked maybe to 4 or 5 managers of the 4 or 5 very big utility companies, and now the floor is open for more key stakeholders. So that's a different system, and we have to get used to it, and we have to learn it. That's not very easy. And finally, of course, also prosumers, energy communities, people, they have to be involved in the policy process. They have also to guide and to develop a decentralized, a socially fair, a gender just energy policy. That's very important. Next slide. And that's a question. So do we see, for example, here, is it now the momentum for us, for energy communities, for a revolution, for renewable energy, for a decentralized energy market? Well, we think it is the potential. So we have a great base. We have the good news of the cheap renewable energy, the flexible renewable energy. The energy system becomes more decentralized, and the energy and the technology allows the citizens to participate. That has not been possible 10 years ago, for example, with only big coal power plants. That's groundbreaking, as I mentioned before. So it's the acknowledgement and support and the participation of the active energy citizens. And I really want to repeat the strong narrative of the Renewable Energy Directive of the Commission, that the citizen at its core take ownership of energy transition, benefit from technologies, participate actively, vulnerable consumers are protected. So that's great. So we have to take the chance and we have to realize the potential. And what does it mean? The regulation and policy needs to catch up with reality and with all the possibilities. And what is the situation? Next slide, please, in the countries. So we see a lot of models in the countries of self-consumption, for example, in your own house, of collective self-consumption in multi-family buildings where you share the generation and also some consumption. We see energy communities running renewable energy power plants and microgrids. And for example, last year, 2019, we saw at least 9 or 10 member states having a regulation on collective self-consumption, which is a great base for the transposition of the renewable energy transition, but it's a different starting point. So the countries are at a different point to transpose. And I just see that question, what is, so of TSOs and DSOs, it's already answered. Next slide, please. So it's the last 2 slides. I want to give a very brief overview what is happening in the countries, and I would be very interested which country is it where the transposition is advanced. It was here, there's no claim on completeness, but we see a very diverse picture of the progress of transposition in the member states, because the basic situation is very different, because the capacity is very different, of course, the priorities. For example, we see in the Czech Republic that a working group is active with it. Gunnar will tell about the Danish situation. And I wanted to highlight here the situation in Ireland, because that's very successful. The Irish colleagues, they have been able to put in place an own auction system. The auction where you have tenders for big, for example, wind energy projects, and they have been able to have a separate budget for renewable energy communities, because normally energy communities, they are discriminated in big auctions because they do not have the capacity and the risk capital. So here, that's very positive, because as far as I know, it was a long fight with the DG competition with the European Commission. And the last slide, that's regarding Germany. So here as I mentioned, for example, we have very great energy cooperatives, energy communities. We have the tenant model, it's collective self-consumption, but we do not see progress on the transposition of the Renewable Energy Directive. So, and here I mentioned some of the most important measures which should be done within the Renewable Energy Directive for individual and collective self-consumption, for example, and also for renewable energy communities. So one example for individuals, for example, that would be to have enabling rules for self-consumption. At the moment, it's not the case, and we do not see any progress on it, what is a pity. And the second, for example, is to have rules on peer-to-peer trading. So really to have a local energy market where participants are able to sell energy and the energy is cheap and available, and so to behave in a system relevant way. So we do not see any progress. We also, for example, we do not see progress for the definition of the renewable energy communities. That's also very important. So there has a lot to be done in Germany, even if we used to be very good with the energy transition. For example, what we did as Bündnis Bürgerenergie, as the umbrella association, we published a paper on energy sharing and to show possible models which are appropriate and positive for all the market players. And that's our role to show, and also the idea of the today's webinar, to exchange ideas on possible business models. Thank you very much for your attention and happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Katharina, for this great overview. There are actually only a couple of questions in the chat. The first question is, do you have any details on Malta?
No, I don't have any details on Malta. I'm sorry. I can try to get it, but the first overview does not cover Malta. So it was really, yeah, just to talk to a lot of people. I see here Wallonia is not a country, of course. I'm sorry for it. I wanted to mention, and I wanted to mention that you have different approaches in Belgium. So you have the 3 regions, and just to be aware of it. Sorry for it.
Okay, I think we should maybe answer 2 more questions and then go over to the next speaker.
Yeah, okay. Should I select the questions?
Yeah, if you want.
So it's wise, what is the reason for the lack of political, of the transform progress in Germany? Yes, that's really a pity. It's our policy, our politicians in the responsible ministry. So we know that, for example, the responsible politicians, they did also vote against the directive at the Commission, and so it's they have a different approach. They would like to increase, to expand the grid, and then to increase the production of renewable energy. And our approach or our proposal is so to start with the decentralized production of renewable energy, where we have a high potential, where we can solve a lot of problems, and then we need a completely different grid architecture. So it's a policy. So that's a policy, and the existing market actors, of course, of the grid operators and the utility companies, like in more countries. Yeah, what else? The energy poverty, why is it so high, is one question. So that's really very important. So it's one effect that we have, the separation in the society, that people become more poor. That's really, and it also affects people, and also for the energy system. And for poor people, the part for the energy supply is very high, and so sometimes they cannot afford it. So, and we have different systems to deal with it, and it's really sometimes much more difficult for poor households, for vulnerable households, to participate in energy communities where you can have an advantage of cheaper photovoltaic energy. So that's a double bind, and we have to cope with it. And so it's great that it's mentioned in the directive.
Maybe one more question about what would be the potential of energy communities in the heating sector. And then all the other questions I have noted, and we will come back to them after all the inputs.
Yeah, so of course we are talking a lot about electricity, which is maybe the easier part of the energy transition, and the heating sector is so important, but it would be also a logical follow-up of a decentralized energy transition, because of course we have to use the potential of the sector coupling. So it's so important to start to produce renewable energy on a decentralized way, and so you could use with storing, with different, with combined heating power plants. So it could be expanded to the heating sector. From my end, it's more complicated, but it has to be considered, and it's also possible to include it for the heating sector. And it needs also a favorable framework for the heating sector here in the directive.
Thank you very much, Katharina. I will now give the floor to Gunnar, who will tell us a bit more about the development and situation in Denmark.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me, and I hope I'm loud and clear.
Mhm.
Good. Yeah, I'm Gunnar Olesen. I'm with the International Network for Sustainable Energy, and I'm from Denmark. International Network for Sustainable Energy is one of the partners of our Erasmus project, and we are happy to be here. We had hoped we would have been at a seminar in Frankfurt, but we also hope we'd like to advertise for all of you that we are starting planning to have a new seminar in the project in Denmark at the 18th of August. We have not announced it widely yet because we still know about the coronavirus, if we can actually have an international seminar in Denmark in August, but we will soon inform you how we are managing. So hopefully to see many of you in Denmark in August. Next slide. In Denmark, we have a history of cooperatives. The power sector was established as cooperatives and municipal companies 100 years ago, and the district heating, which is now 62% of all heating, was established as cooperatives and municipal companies, effectively starting after the Second World War, starting around 1950. And then there was, since then, there was a lot of development of the district heating, so it now is so massive. At the same time, we saw centralization and larger power plants in the period until 1990. But then also starting in the 1980s, a new decentralization with cooperative-owned and grid-connected wind power, which was really when wind power became big in Denmark and to more or less in the whole world. And at the same time, there was this district heating companies, which was also still cooperatively, many of them, who was making gas cogeneration of heat and power. But then, since then, less favorable regulation have been leading to fewer cooperatives, cooperative windmills, and now even closure of local CHP plants, also because many of them are on fossil gas and we need to move on to renewable energy. And one of the less favorable resolutions is the open electricity market of EU and the stop of the feed-in tariffs, but it's not all to blame on the EU, it's also Danish regulations. So we have a great past, but of course we have a challenging future. Next slide. A little bit about district heating. It was mentioned before. This 64% of all Danish heating, I think this was 63 on the previous slide, but this is updated. It's actually 64 now. And owned by 350 consumer cooperatives, which are smaller, and 50 larger municipal-owned non-profit companies. So it's all like a big non-profit sector. And it's also still growing with 67,000 new consumers, according to statistics I found for 2019. 60% of the energy is from renewable energy and 70% is from CHP. And then we have a legislation that guarantees this non-profit status, which is a benefit for making cooperatives because it really promotes cooperative compared to normal businesses that have not so much interest in making a non-profit company. And then another important thing is we have loans and municipal guarantees that makes it affordable, because if you install a district heating system, all your investments is underground, and the bank cannot go and take back those tubes, pipes that are underground. So there's not a lot of value for the bank in having loan, but once you have a municipal guarantee, you can get those very cheap loans that we have nowadays in Europe. So these are two of the things behind, but of course there's also advices. Now we have a very strong association supporting it, and it has been like a custom way of having heating. So it's also starting to become cultural. Thank you. Next slide. And then we had this wind power expansion in Denmark. Starting with the windmills became too big for single houses and farms in the early 1990s or even earlier. We originally had wind feed-in tariffs of 85% of the consumer price cooperatives and fair connection costs. And with that basis, we had increased from 5 megawatt in 1985 to 840 megawatt in 1998. And that was really the breakthrough for wind power. But then the preferential rule for cooperatives ended. We've seen much fewer cooperatives since. Now we have instead rules, so all land-based wind projects should offer 20% of the shares to local citizens, and we can get state guarantees for development costs until 70,000 euro, but it's not enough. But in total, that's out of the 3,500 megawatt of land-based wind, of the 3,500 megawatt of the 3,800 megawatt of land-based wind power established by citizens, private investors, but later some of them being sold to power companies. And there's been a big investment. Thank you. Next slide. So in brief, our experience with the right legislation, community energy can deliver a large share of energy supply with affordable prices and also local support, so we don't get a lot of local protests. We have a lot of local protests nowadays, but that's because they are not involved in the community. Citizens will go for the affordable and popular solutions. Transition to sustainable energy can be faster when community energy is part of the development. Cooperatives can manage large investments with the right financial and technical advisors, as we've seen as some of the large cooperatives of even wind parks in Denmark, like a small offshore park called Middelgrund near Copenhagen. But the EU internal market regulation have not been supportive to community because of equal access rules and state aid guidelines against the feed-in tariff. But hopefully the new EU rules for energy communities will change that. Next slide. So how are we implementing these rules, new EU rules in Denmark? We are implementing the renewable energy directive and the electricity market directive with public consultation expected mid-2020 and adoption of law in Parliament the fourth quarter of 2020. While some parts of the REST directive can be delayed because it's the electricity directive that was approved first and therefore has to be implemented first. The guiding principles, I mean, we haven't seen actually this law, and the public consultation is not there. So this is also only based on my dialogue with the energy agency that's preparing the law. But there should be a supportive framework that's in the directive, and we have no details. So it's really a question how much will be. Sharing of power production via existing network, but that's not a big thing. Equitable payment for system costs, right and duties according to roles in the power sector, but they don't want to have ownership or leasing of networks, which they might need to have because of the EU directive. This is a crucial, not a crucial issue, but it's a questionable issue. Next slide, please. So for us, the key to success for future renewable energy communities in Denmark is how this is actually transformed into law. What is a supportive framework? We think there should be reasonable administrative rules for small entities, so you don't have the same administrative rules to make a small local energy system than for a power plant. There should be no balance responsibility for small producers, so they do not need to tell exactly how much they will produce a day ahead. And there should be some free advice services so that normal people who are not expert in this can also participate. There should be local tariffs for local production, and that's, we're speaking about local tariffs for use of the network, so you can actually send power to your neighbor without paying the full cost of using the network of the entire country. You have possibilities to benefit from local flexibility with tariffs, etc. So if you have some consumer and producer who are able to manage their consumption and demand, so they don't give a lot of flows on the bigger network or on the transformators, they should have a reward for that, because then you don't need to expand these networks and transformers so much. And of course, there should be a possibility to benefit from renewable energy support schemes, which is also important. So all this together is what we need. And I think to end off that, yes, next slide, that we need to see that all this can be realized with the Renewable Energy Directive, but in Denmark and probably other countries, I believe that it will only be realized if you have a public debate about it, and that it's not all left to the energy administration and the power companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gunnar, for this interesting presentation and outlook. We have a comment in the chat and also a question.
I'm just looking. The Darius is asking, it'd be interesting to compare the cost per household and the return on investment into renewable energy among countries. I mean, that's quite a big question, which I can't answer straight from the specific of Denmark only. And in Denmark, our experience is that consumers are actually starting to invest, for instance, in PV on the roofs, if they can expect a payback around 10 years. That's a limit for Danish house owners. But apart from that, these costs are going up and down, and it's difficult to compare. But nowadays, of course, renewable energy, solar and wind is getting cheaper and cheaper. So for those particularly the most profitable or the lowest cost systems, they are now cheaper than other investments in power. And how does Denmark prevent interest group from saying that nuclear is clean energy? Nuclear is not clean energy, but the other thing is that nuclear is not cheap energy. So since there's a lot of focus on costs in Denmark, nuclear is not an option. I'd say for groups like us, it's about that we don't like nuclear, we don't like the radioactivity, we like all the problems that comes with it. But for other actors who are not worried about the future, not worried about the risk, I mean, they're worried about the cost. So as long as nuclear is so incredibly expensive, it's not an option in Denmark. But there are still pro-nuclear groups from various reasons, and they're not, even in spite of the complete craziness of nuclear, they're still there. And then are Danish household proactive in engaging in energy cooperatives? I would say at the moment, no. Is shared ownership of energy assets generally part of the discourse within families among lay people? Only to some extent. As I said, we have all these cooperatives, power and heating companies, and we have a lot of these cooperative things. I also have a cooperative water supply where I live. And so it's something that you meet, but I would say that it's only a small part of the population that gets interest in these, that they are actually co-owners of all their utilities. But still, it's something that comes up. And for this, say, wind power cooperatives, which was mainly put up in rural areas where it's like smaller communities, they were getting together and rallying around these cooperatives because it also meant development of their area. How about wave energy? Denmark has been investing in it, maybe not as much as UK and other countries, but we don't have a financial feasible system at the moment, but we are still testing and there's still research going on. And a few interest group. Yes, okay, that was just a comment from Henning, my colleague here in Denmark. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Gunnar. I think we move now on to Poland, and we will hear from Joanna about the situation in Poland and the challenges they face.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joanna Furmaga. I represent Polish Grid Network and also Social Ecological Institute, which is one of our member groups. Well, and I am also a prosumer. So you can see a photo of my house with the PV on the roof, just very fresh, few months ago. We did it, and heating pump, and also, I'm not sure if you can see the green curtain to protect us from the sun in summer. Well, you can see also the green logo, the Więcej niż Energia, which is more than energy movement and campaign just on civic energy we run. Yes, so sorry. Well, so actually in 2015, together with few NGOs and self-governments, we initiated the movement in the moment when our parliament proceeded on the Renewable Acts Amendment, and as the result, the feed-in tariffs for prosumers were adopted. But unfortunately, it was never implemented because few months later we had an election and new government canceled this law, and instead of them the net metering system was introduced, but with the ratio 1 to 0.8 for the smallest installation, with no support schemes and no subsidies, just treat it like a hobby for rich people. So, well, so actually we had a lot of time. So our movement now had 150 institutional partners, like cities, regions, small communities, universities, NGOs, of course, and also renewables and energy efficiency branch organization. We are running just public campaign with special focus on advocacy and promoting idea of civic energy by different forms like publication, conferences, workshop, and media works, of course. Yes. Well, but finally something changed, and we can say that last year kind of new beginning was started. We had a really rapid growth of micro installation in Poland. That was almost 200% in 1 year. So you can see the numbers from the 2018 and 2019. So at the end of the 2019, we have just over 150,000 micro installation with the total capacity of 1 gigawatt. Now, after first quarter of this year, total PV capacity in Poland is 1.6 gigawatt, and just 75% of it is just prosumers installation. So it's really impressive. Of course, well, of course, numbers maybe are not very large, but well, we can say that's nothing comparing to the potential, as in Poland we have a potential of 3-4 million houses. Well, but anyway, we can see a dynamic, and we hope, well, this trend will be continued. Well, why this rapid growth? So, well, actually, some new governmental instruments were introduced, and in general, coal-generated electricity prices surge. Probably you know that it was among the other the rapid growth of the ETS CO2 allowances. But when we are talking about this governmental instruments, we have first of all quite good tax deduction from the beginning of 2019. Then in the summertime we have an election campaign, and well, somebody says that thanks to that the government introduced the direct subsidy for individual micro installation of 5,000 zlotys. Also, in some region, subsidies from EU funds much higher even than 500 zloty. Also, during the last summer, the net metering system was introduced for small business, for well, just very small installation up to 50 kilowatts. Yes. Okay. Well, just to understand a bit the situation in Poland, I show you just few figures about well, energy mix in Poland. So first of all, you can see just well, that currently we had nearly 77% of coal generation and only about 11% of renewables. We have, well, all of us in EU, we have goals for 2020, and for Poland it is 15%. For the moment, our government prediction is a little bit over 13. About goals for 2030, current EU goals is 32, and Polish government goals is 21, eventually 23, on the condition that additional EU support will be provided. Now, just a picture about renewables in Poland. Please look at this light line. This is wind. Of course, it is the biggest share, but you can see that from 2016 until now, the flat is just, the line is very flat. So no progress, no new investments, well, just no development about it. And why? So the reason is shown on this picture. It is a law introduced in 2016 saying that no new investments could be located in the area of the distance of 10 times longer than height of the windmill to the nearest building. And this restriction excludes new windmill in practice in 90% of area of the country. So, of course, this is very imperfect, very good, very bad law. It should be improved very soon. Well, now a few words about energy cooperatives. We are talking a lot today. Well, actually, I would like to start with the last point of this slide. Just the number of energy cooperatives in Poland now is unfortunately 0. But there is a small hope, as last year the new legislation on energy cooperatives was adopted. That cooperatives could be treated little bit like prosumers, but unfortunately with many restrictions. So you can see that it is also net metering system with ratio 1 to 0.6. Maximum capacity is 10 megawatts. Cooperatives could be created only on rural areas. Urban districts are excluded. Cooperatives could be located on the area of maximum 3 neighboring communes and have maximum 1,000 members. And installation must cover at least 70% of total community needs. However, despite of all these obstacles and difficulties, the interest of community power in Poland is growing, and we can see more and more good projects across the country. Majority of them were supported by EU funds and implemented by municipalities and self-governments for projects of schools, hospital, or public buildings. Recently, we have also some first pilot projects of housing cooperatives. It is allowed only for the common spaces like lifts, corridors, lighting, and pumps. And just very recently, a few weeks ago, a new support scheme was introduced, was announced by National Fund of Environmental Protection for housing cooperatives. For the moment, it's very modest program for one region only. It is Greater Poland. And it is just loans and small remission possibility. However, potential for this type of project is really high, as in Poland we have over 2 million apartments in the structure of housing cooperatives in Poland. Finally, we are going to the future and Directive Thread 2. We are talking about today a lot. So in Poland, Ministry of Development is responsible for preparation, and preparation was started last year already. We as a Polish Green Network were, and Modern Energy Movement already submit our concern and suggestion to this legislation, and of course hope that they will be accepted. The project of the legislation, the transposition, is expected in June this year, and we heard that it could be on time, and of course then it will be open for public consultation and public participation. So the key issue to be introduced in this legislation, it is, well, possibility to create energy cooperatives in cities, changing accounting ratio for micro renewables just to have it 1-to-1. Well, now, as I mentioned before, it is 1 to 0.8 or 7. Virtual prosumers and neighborly sharing possibility. Higher limits for small and medium enterprises just to 500 kilowatts. Now it is just 50, and it is very, very new, just introduced last year, as I told you before. Of course, some liberalization about onshore wind power, introducing kind of hybrid model of PV plus wind plus biogas. And finally, of course, suitable and adequate support for energy community must be implemented. We are counting a lot on new EU budget, new MFF, but also some national subsidy schemes are very important. Well, at the end, I would like to raise just some other aspects. Of course, the proper legislation are just very basic, and they are necessary base for developing energy community, but it is not enough. Well, we need to work just with society. In Poland, we have some bad association from the communist times, especially on rural areas. But in the same time, new generation is very enthusiastic for creating communities, not only energy, but just doing something together. And of course, we are hope for them to be kind of, well, just pioneers of civic energy and cooperatives. Well, actually, we definitely need more good practices from the other countries. So I would like to thank colleagues from Denmark and Germany for their presentation and their experiences, and also hope for future cooperation. Well, and I think that it is all. So thank you very much. And well, happy to answer a question if there are some questions.
Thank you.
Anna.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been quite tough, but it's nice to hear that there is also growing interest and hope, and also with directive. And I like your slide about that it's not just about the legislation, but also the culture in the country, which is very important, and that we have to get everyone on board. I think I saw a question from Gabriele. The distance between...
I cannot see that. I'm sorry. Maybe it is.
I can read it out quickly. The distance between windmills is the same in Bavaria, and like what's the reason? Is it because of birds, or the magnetic fields, or the interests of other energy providers?
Well, that actually it was well connected to some, let's say, some local communities, some local communities activity, and very much connected with some politician during the previous election campaign in Poland. That was 2015. So it is just fear from the local few, really very few communities about also, of course, magnetics, the health protection. Well, of course, some protests were also well regarding birds, but mostly it was very, very much supported by some politician. And connected with well, kind of how to say, well, you remember the slide of the share of coal in Poland, that somebody says that there is a joke that Poland is coalland, and for many years our government just wanted to really keep this priority in energy system. So, well, we can say that this is just campaign against any renewables. That there are some this kind of reason.
Okay, thank you, Joanna. I think the rest in the chat is just comments. So I would go to our last presentation from Derya, so we can hear about the situation in Turkey.
Hello to everyone. I'm Derya Nazım Ünverir, the chairwoman of Troya Renewable Energy Cooperative, which is in Çanakkale, Turkey. Today I am happy to be with you even online. Hope to be face to face, of course. I'm going to talk about the story of our cooperative and the situation of the other renewable energy cooperatives in Turkey. Our cooperative was founded in 2017 and now we have 25 members. I just want to tell you the story of our cooperative from very beginning. In 2013, in Çanakkale, we live, 15 coal thermal power plants were allowed to be established in Çanakkale. And we begin to think about it, what can we do against it? And at that time, we met with the renewable energy cooperative models. In Turkey, there were no energy cooperatives at that time, but we didn't have the opportunity to establish such a cooperative. However, there were lots of examples in Europe, and we begin to get in touch with these cooperatives, and this cooperative model attracted our attention, and in our NGO, Troya Environment Association, we started to research on renewable energy cooperatives. And we liked the idea of producing our clean and sustainable energy, because becoming a member of an energy cooperative is a way of investing socially and economically in sustainable development. To be active with the climate and at the same time earning with it made us excited. In 2014, for the first time, the concept of community energy was added to our legacy, to the Turkish laws. And after 2 years, in 2016, some new additions were made to this law to regulate the right of production to renewable energy cooperatives. And the name of renewable energy cooperative entered to our legislation for the first time in March 2016. So it became possible to establish renewable energy cooperatives in Turkey. And after this amendment, 10 energy cooperatives were established immediately after this amendment. And after 1 year in 2017, 8 of my friends, we became together and we established our cooperative. Then new partners joined us. We have 25 partners now in the cooperative. They are living in various villages and centers of Çanakkale. And last year in 2019, in April, we found the land where we will build our solar power plants. We found a land, 12 dekar in Hacıköy, in Çanakkale, in Viga district, and we rented it. We also made an agreement with the owners to purchase the land after the acceptance of our application, we applied to various places for the control of the application of the land, and we made the productivity measurements and other things. And it has been determined that the land is suitable for solar power plant constructions. So we completed all the documents, necessary documents, and we submitted our file to Bursa UEDAŞ. UEDAŞ is an electricity distribution company. In Turkey, it is divided some distribution areas, and we belong to UEDAŞ district. After our application, we have informed by the email that everything is okay, everything is complete for the permit, and our documents are positive, and the permit board will meet on May 20, and our application will be signed and approved. They told us this, they mentioned us. We were very happy with this news, but however, before the permit board met, a week before, in May 12th, our law system is changed, and our application was rejected. All of our plans were cancelled with the amendment of the law. With the amendment of the law, common counter obligation was introduced, and at the same time, the installation of solar power plants in the land was banned with this amendment. And as I just said, our partners, our cooperative partners, live in different places. So none of us are in the same center. So we don't have a common counter. It's impossible. This situation totally broke our plans. Each of our partners sits in separate places. We don't have the opportunity to use a common counter, and now we are just waiting. Due to this change of law amendment, lawsuits has been filed, but it hasn't been concluded yet. But I don't think that the result will be very positive. We only hope that the government will abandon this regulation and make a new law regulation. We are now continuing our efforts to remove the regulation that prevents the establishment of power plants on non-agricultural land, and to facilitate the allocation of non-agricultural public lands to renewable energy cooperatives, and to remove the common counter requirement, because it is a problem. This means that if you are not living in the same apartment or in the same garden, it's impossible to have a common counter. This is the story of our cooperative, and if I want to say something about other cooperatives in Turkey, there are now currently 50 energy cooperatives exist in Turkey. Just 4 of them received their permissions and made their installation before the law changed last year in 2019. These 4 cooperatives, they are producing their energy now and giving to their partners. And other 8 cooperatives, they are about to set up their solar power plants. But the rest of the cooperatives, they are just waiting like us. They are on hold like us because we need a new law system or some other new things in our law system. This is the summary of energy cooperatives in Turkey, and this is all I can say about cooperatives. Yes, this is the work areas of energy cooperatives in Turkey. As I said to you before, we have some district areas for distribution to energy in Turkey. These every color is another district area, and these district areas also, they are the work areas of energy cooperatives in Turkey. Yes, that's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Deya, for sharing the story of your cooperative. And yeah, so we're ashamed to hear about that amendment of the law, but great to hear that you keep fighting it.
Yes.
Yeah, there is a question from Anne. If you could explain again what you mean with common counter.
Common counter, there are, I don't know if I mention it in wrong words, I don't know. There is a box in front of our houses, you know, to count the how much electricity we use in our houses. How can I say it?
Is it a network connection point? So to collect and to summarize the energy coming from the public grid and going into the public grid from is it this meter? No.
Yes, if you are living in different places, you cannot have a common counter. The amendment of law is saying that you can produce your energy and use your energy in the same point. If you are producing it in different place, you cannot use it in another place. You can produce it and you can use it in the same point. I don't know how to explain another way.
I think it's clear.
It's the same it's the same translation. Substation. You can get from the same substation wherever you are connected and you are getting from the grid. You need to be over there so you can make exchange and pay whatever is extra. So it's the same substation. It should be. The customer should be in the same place. You cannot be different.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Darius, I will keep your question for later on. Now I would like us to go into breakout groups and work on 2 questions. And one question is on the barriers that you face in your country when it comes to implementing decentralized renewable energy solutions. And the second question refers to best practices that you have in your country or do you know from other countries. And I will share a link with you in the chat box already, but I will explain it.
In 10 years.
Oh, there, yeah. Would it be okay if we have the question at the end? So we would go into breakout groups now and then answer all the questions that are coming in now at the end of the webinar.
Okay.
Okay, so basically we will go into breakout groups now and you will be assigned to one. So very shortly it will say join a breakout group on your screen, and then you just have to click on that when it appears. And you will have 10 minutes to discuss with the others the 2 questions I just mentioned. And it is always helpful if you assign one person to take notes on the online Google Doc that I have just shared in the chat. And well, you can decide, but sometimes it's also helpful to have a moderator in the group. So everyone gets a chance to speak and nobody is interrupted. And that can be anyone. So just that for the clarifications, and it will automatically close after the 10 minutes. So we have 50 participants and we'll have 5 rooms. And so you have 10 participants and you can introduce each other or to each other and then work on the questions, and we will summarize them afterwards. So I will open the rooms now. And I will see you back here in 10 minutes. Yeah, maybe we quickly mention some challenges that I've seen, which is definitely, has been mentioned, like lack of information, even though I can't see their comment anymore in the countryside, but I think everywhere, to be honest. And then, of course, the legislation and taxation, which are big barriers for proper implementation. As well as kind of the thought of competition and existing providers who that wouldn't really want citizens in power.
Yes, and I guess one barrier, for example, that was in Turkey is many countries are talking about bridging technologies like natural gas or other technologies that really also hinders and stops the encouraged and ambitious way ahead renewable energy and decentralized energy. So that's we have a lot of legislation on that. And well, I think also the existing business models of the big players, of the key players, that's a big point. So who is earning some money now, like the grid operators? Of course, if the business models will change, that is really difficult, and there has to be alternatives shown how it could work. So it's, I guess, also barriers are really visible and very good and successful, and a lot of good practices. So it's to have really many of them.
Yeah. Do you also want to share one best practice from your group, or would anyone else from the participants like to share a best practice before we look at the last few questions? If you'd like to share something, you can just write it in the chat.
May I say something? This I mentioned in the group and it was summarized nicely. In Turkey, these unlicensed applications, the government didn't want to give licenses to photovoltaic power plants. Now they are doing auctions with very low prices. But at that time, they said, okay, there was too much pressure on the government to support renewable energy because there were about 600 people who want to invest something unprofitable. They said, okay, we don't give feed-in tariffs like in Europe, but we will buy if somebody is a customer without producing anything, is willing to invest 1 megawatt, which is 20,000 square meter. Many people have such lands in Turkey. So as a customer, they are connected and they make the investment. And since it became very cheap now, from the grid price, which is $13.3, when it became cheaper and cheaper, people start to make more money. So it became a very profitable investment for the individual customers. So that's why this became 6,000 projects owned by the local people, kind of a community power project. So now it is stopped. So this was a good practice. I mean, when it first started in, I think, World Wind Energy Association conference, I made a paper that, hey, this unlicensed is providing the conditions for community power development in Turkey. This was it. The second point is, now we are convincing the municipalities. I'm working for the Istanbul Greater City Municipality now, one day. So we are trying to develop the energy economy ecology model of these cities, 45 cities with my students we are working. And then we are preparing the roadmaps for transition to 100% renewable energy, which we want it to be community power based. I mean, the cooperatives and municipalities, they own their own system and they produce their electricity. So not individual cooperatives locally, but the whole cities in the transition to 100% renewable energy. We think community power will have an important role. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this contribution. Anne, would you also like to share your example, just maybe in a minute or a couple of minutes, very briefly?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and I saw some comments that actually municipalities can play a key role. And yesterday I was in a webinar where they explained, and there were different municipalities presenting the role they played in pushing forward the prosumer approach, which is very strong. So now in France there is a big national association of municipalities and local governments. It's been existing for a while already, but it took really advantage of the new EU directive, and it is really helping citizens and small enterprises to come together in collective projects to produce electricity out of solar PV, or it can be wind or different type of renewable energies. And the difficulty with the tax problems, the tariffs, all of these can be uplifted or can be overcome through the technical help of the municipalities that work also together with a consultants company and provide this free service, actually, which is so important to help the collective projects to come to reality, because it is sometimes really complex. So the political role, I can say, of these municipalities has been a key support to help in France the development of energy cooperatives and prosumer projects.
Thank you very much, Anne. So now I would use the last 5 minutes to go back to the questions that we had earlier, or you can also post other questions in the chat if you want, and if the speakers would be so kind to maybe stay a couple more minutes after the session would officially close. So there was still a question to Katharina. And the question was, if there is no good progress in Germany, how is it that the number of communities keep growing? Is there support from the country?
That's a very good question. And so it's that we have to get more in detail, because we still see a number of growing energy communities, mostly energy cooperatives. It's due to our Renewable Energy Act we still have, where we get a guaranteed feed-in tariff. That's a one point. And the second point is that what is really positive in Germany, and what is also due to the government 20 years ago, that we have the Renewable Energy Act, and we have a great development of renewable energy communities and cooperatives. There is a high expertise, there is a high diversity of business models, and so we see that within the frame what is possible, that for example energy communities are operating microgrids, they develop new business models, new energy services. So I think it's most of because of the developing and growing expertise. It's because of the decreasing prices of the renewables. It's because of the possibility to have collective self-consumption, but it could be much more. So that's a point that it could be it could explode. And we had a steep curve 2013, 2014, and then we have the updates of the Renewable Energy Act, and so it flattened the curve, just to mention this expression. And we still have some new organizations, but so the development could be much higher, and that would need the transposition of the renewable energy directive, for example, that energy communities are really allowed to share energy. So to share energy, to share the energy of my roof with my neighbor, using it for the washing machine. So that's not possible for me and not possible for the community. So that's really very necessary in terms of the community and in terms of boosting the energy transition.
Thank you, great. There was also a question to Gunnar. I know you already mentioned it in the chat, but maybe not everyone saw it. So could you just say a few words again, if it's possible to go off-grid in Denmark?
If you didn't see my chat, yes, if you are connected to electricity and you don't want to be connected anymore because you have made your own power system, you are welcome to go off-grid. But you're not allowed to send power from one house to another house if these houses are not on the same legal piece of land. So you can go off-grid as individual houses, but not as a community.
Okay, thank you. And then there was a question from Darius. Can we foresee that in a few decades it will be possible to have autonomous solutions widely for the citizens? I'm not quite sure who it was directed to. Darius, do you maybe want to briefly speak up and clarify the question again?
Yes, my question is to everybody, probably to think it over. In some decades, we will have totally different technical solutions than today. So we can imagine that the situation will also change a lot. So we can foresee maybe that the small grids or local grids would not be necessary anymore. Maybe only those lines for the industry would be needed. But otherwise, it would be possible to go autonomous.
If I may say, I think what we see is that local solutions getting cheaper and cheaper. So I think what we rather see is that, say, islands which have not been connected to the grid anymore, they will never be connected to the public grid with long transmission lines. And also it could be that you could have more local autonomous areas. It's still difficult for individual. It's possible for individual houses, but it's also quite expensive. So it's not done that much. And in Northern Europe, we have very little sun, so solar doesn't provide much in the winter, which makes it more complicated. But in Southern Europe, where you have more sun in the winter, the cost of batteries would not be so bad, so you could actually do it if you are careful about not using too much power in the dark days in the winter, few dark days.
Yes, but also we can foresee that the energy demand will decrease very much because of new solutions.
It goes a little bit both ways. I mean, we are now speaking about heat pumps to use more electricity for heating, which is a good thing because we don't need gas or oil anymore. But the bad thing is, of course, we need more electricity.
And I wanted to add that it's true, so we have diverse developments, the energy demand will increase, but anyhow, so what we think and we are convinced about is that micro-optimization, what we are talking about today, to have the decentralized energy production, to have demand side, to have active citizens and reactive in a way which is system relevant, for example, so that already on the local decentralized level, it's the cheapest way, and it can come up to a high grade of autarky and independence. So but we don't need the technologies in 10, 15, 20 years. But for today, what Gunnar mentioned, we have very cheap renewable energy technologies, and we have the system. For example, with the energy communities, we have also the funding, for example, of the citizens, so really to participate them also in a financial way, so that it can solve solutions and could be started immediately. That I would like to mention because brought in the municipalities. Today we talked about the directive which has to be transposed on the national level, but the municipalities are so important and they are doing already greatly. So we see in Germany, for example, 100% municipalities, and they really they use everything what they have in the legal frame. And here we can learn a lot, and that's also bottom up. That's also participating the citizens, but coming from bottom down, really to transpose the directive and to allow really energy sharing and peer-to-peer. So the municipalities would be maybe the first actors and stakeholders to push it again and to drive the decentralized energy production. And the last thought from my end is, because now we are in Corona times, which is very difficult, I guess, for all of us, but here in Germany, in Bavaria, we are talking with municipalities, and we see that, for example, public participation for renewable energy power plants funded by the citizens now could be, for example, one way to boost the decentralized energy transition, because utility companies may face also with financial problems. That's just one idea we are currently developing, but I guess that there are many opportunities also to boost this development.
Thank you. There's another question to Gunnar.
Oh.
Yeah, it's in the chat. It's Denmark was working on a system of payment reward for energy storing services. Is it implemented or in use?
Well, that is so this frequency balancing services, which is on. I mean, the frequency balances is under development. The idea is in the Danish and the Nordic electricity system that they try to make as many of the regulations as possible into markets, which is both a good and a bad thing. But seen from the positive side, it means that you can actually small users were supposed to be able to participate in this. So far, it's mainly the big players who is doing it, and the shorter. I mean, now we have had this time hourly variations for many years, and they're now having also shorter variations that can be markets. But the frequency balance is a very, very short time regulation is not implemented yet. They're working on it. and so far it has not benefited local energy communities or prosumers.
Okay, and then there are two last questions from Gabriele. They're a bit more general and they're to everyone. So one is about the current situation that the oil has its lowest price ever, and the question is if that will put a brake on renewables in general.
If I may come in, I just think that if there's negative prices of oil, of course, that would make, but I don't think that'll last. If we're speaking about oil prices, say this 30 euro per barrel, which seems to be the price, except for a couple of days with strange developments, even nowadays for electricity, wind and solar is so cheap, so even at $30, oil cannot compete.
And also, if I may add that if the wells, the oil wells, they close it, they damp it, the oil will cool inside. It's hot, so it's coming out. But if they close it, it's financially not worth it to start the same well again. They have to drill again. So it's not like a tap, you open it or close it, but there are some physical barriers.
Okay, and the last question is that in or across the EU we have different patterns of housing. So some countries have more kind of individual houses, and some have like families ownership or rental housing, multifamily homes, and so on. And does that change anything in the interest in decentral energy? Is there a link?
Maybe I would start to answer the question. I think what is great really in the directive, because it considers the role of individuals, for example, to become a prosumer for individual self-consumption and also on the collective self-consumption, what is very important. So it's really, so we see some tenant models, which is also in Germany. It's a very nice model, but it has to be improved. So that's a one point. And the second point is what we have to keep in mind, that the housing is very differently, and that for some countries maybe energy efficiency in building, it's for each country very, very important, but for some countries maybe it's more important to have a better energy efficiency standard. And the last point is regarding also the directive, so to allow the people to become a part of the energy system, so that is very positive, because each and everyone could be a member of an energy community if there is a national legal framework. So it has to be transposed to the national law, and what you earlier mentioned, also to consider the culture, how people live, how collective assemblies are organized, for example, that has to be considered very much.
Okay, would anyone else like to add anything? If not, then we're through with our questions and also the end of our webinar. It's only about 10 minutes longer, so not too bad. Thank you to all the speakers for your great input, and also thank you to all the participants for contributing, even though it was quite a short breakout group, but it was quite interesting to do and see how it works. And now I would like to ask our speakers if they would like to say any final remarks.
I would just say thank you for all of your participation, and I'm happy to see all of you and hear all of you here. And I hope we will continue the cooperation. And also, as I said in the start, we have another seminar on the project coming up in August, where we might be able to meet in person in Denmark. But more about that by email. Thank you.
Same from me. Thank you very much for your interest. It's really great that such a big group joined us today, and it's complex to transpose directive, but it's great to see all of you. Some of you I know, and you all, I guess, have a great experience and expertise, and so it's really possible. And so from the bottom up, we can provide the expertise and the engagement, and so that's one very important part for the transposition. All the best for you, and hope to see and meet you soon.
Okay, I think I will close the webinar with that last statement. Thanks again and have a nice day, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.